Imagine, right now, in 2026, the country is ruled by an actual Tsar. Not someone who just cuts ribbons and waves from a balcony, a real royal family, in power for over 300 years running, without a break. Such a country nearly existed. It's Russia. And it all came down to one person and one decision, made over a few weeks in the spring of 1917. Let me say up front, this is a what-if story. No one is predicting the future or making political statements. We're simply going to trace a chain of cause and effect and see where it logically leads. So here's what actually happened. The last Russian Tsar was Nicholas II. By 1917, Russia had already been fighting in World War I for 3 agonizing years. People were starving. Soldiers were exhausted. And Nicholas's own generals, the men commanding his own army, told him bluntly, either you step down or you lose everything. And he stepped down. He signed a document abdicating the throne. He simply gave up. He handed power to a provisional government, which collapsed within a few months, opening the door for a group of revolutionaries, the Bolsheviks, to seize total control. It was these same Bolsheviks who later founded the Soviet Union, a massive communist power that would face off against the United States in the Cold War for the next 70 years. One signature. One exhausted man. And history veered onto a completely different path for more than 100 years. Now here's where it gets interesting. What if he had simply refused to sign? Here's the catch. Just not signing wouldn't have been enough. The country was already boiling with rage. For the Tsar to actually still be around in 2026, the entire system of power would have had to change completely. And we have a great example of how that works right next door, in Europe. That's Britain. Think about it. The British king today doesn't run the government. He doesn't pass laws. He shows up at ceremonies, his portrait's on stamps, while the country is actually run by an elected parliament. If the Russian monarchy had survived, it would almost certainly have had to go through the same deal. Give up real power, keep only the crown as a symbol. A generation or two later, we'd most likely have a Russian Tsar cutting ribbons and delivering New Year's addresses, while an elected government actually runs the country. Okay, now for the question everyone's really wondering about, what would have happened with World War II? And this is where the story takes a turn most people don't expect. Many assume, without the revolution, Russia is stronger, and the war is won more easily. But if you follow the logic, it's actually more likely the opposite. The Soviets' brutal, forced industrialization in the 1930s, millions dead, but factories built at breakneck speed, is precisely what turned an agrarian country into an industrial giant in under a decade. A monarchy would most likely have modernized far more slowly and gently, which means that by 1941, Russia might not have had the tank factories and heavy industry that, in actual history, helped it withstand the German invasion. In other words, the revolution that killed millions of people may well have been the very reason the country survived the deadliest war in history at all. So what would everyday life look like for an ordinary person under a Russian Tsar today? Look at the countries that kept their monarchies: Britain, Spain, Japan. In daily life, it's barely noticeable. You still go to work, pay your taxes, complain about politicians online just the same. Once a year, the Tsar gives a solemn televised address. Every few years, there's a royal wedding or coronation that the whole country talks about for a week. And that's essentially it. Which means a crown in Moscow today would most likely mean not a dictatorship, but roughly what it means in London: a beautiful tradition, a tourist draw, a symbol of continuity, with almost zero real power behind it. And here's what it all really comes down to. One decision by one exhausted man in 1917 split history into 2 completely different roads. One, brutal, fast, forced modernization at the cost of millions of lives. The other, probably slower, gentler change with a completely unpredictable outcome during the deadliest war in human history. And the most uncomfortable part is that there's no clean answer as to which of these roads would have turned out better. There's only a chain of cause and effect. A reminder that history was never predetermined. It hinged on one exhausted man, making one decision, on one particular day in 1917.